One of the things I love about data analytics is that there's no one right path to becoming a data analyst, and I like how this interview series really shines a light on different journeys. In this first episode, we're talking about my story from occupational therapy to data analytics. We talk about resume, cover letters, and portfolios, and some of my top advice for transitioning from a healthcare career into data.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for sitting down to chat with me today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to do it.
To everyone listening out there, my name is Alice, and I'm a data scientist at Maven Analytics, where Lauren works as a data analyst. And we've worked together for the past few years, and we always have amazing conversations, and I'm so glad it's getting recorded today. My first question for you is, you've been a data analyst at Maven for a few years now. So what do you do in your data role?
Yeah, primarily I work in SQL is probably my main tool, and then I also use Excel when I need to. And really, I'm looking at customer data, like how many people are taking courses, how many people are completing different lessons, just kind of tracking to see what our customers are interested in.
That sounds like a classic data role. So can you rewind 5 years and tell us what you were doing then and how that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, so 5 years ago, I was an occupational therapist working in a school. I was working with students on things like handwriting, fine motor skills, sensory skills, attention during class. So nothing seemingly like what I'm doing now. And the thing is, like, I knew I wasn't happy with what I was doing then. I had been an OT for about 8 years. I tried a bunch of different settings. So as an OT, you can kind of go into skilled nursing facilities and work with older adults. You can go into hospitals, you can go into schools, you can go into home health care. And I had kind of tried them all. And it was just not really what I looked at. I didn't see myself doing it for forever. And so what I kind of did for myself when I realized that it really wasn't going to work out for me in the long run, I made a list, honestly, of what I knew I wanted in a future role. And that was things like I wanted growth opportunities. I wanted to be able to grow out of that initial entry level role into something else. I thought I wanted something like more in the technical space, and I really wanted the opportunity for remote work. And so I didn't start right away with data. I looked at a bunch of different things. I took courses in stuff like UX design, front end web development, and nothing ever really stuck. I kind of got to a certain point, and then I was like, maybe it's not the right fit. And I totally stumbled onto data. So I found even the concept of data analytics through TikTok, which like
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
yes, it is. I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but it is how I found it. I had never even considered data analytics as a career path before because I am not math driven. I am not fantastic at numbers. But I thought it sounded really interesting, and so I wanted to try a course and see if maybe it was something that I could enjoy, and luckily it really was.
See, that's really interesting because I feel like people often think that it's like a very intimidating field and you do have to know all these math and stats, but I don't think that's the case. I feel like it's a lot more about problem solving, critical thinking, and even like organization to some degree.
Absolutely. Yes, totally. And I think that that's where I found that it was really, really a good fit for me because all the things that you just mentioned were things that I enjoyed doing in my current job and wanted to find a way to like replicate just in a whole different way.
So then it sounds like you mentioned you were doing those things in your current job. Like how did you find that was those were also good skills for a data analyst?
It was partially kind of luck and also just kind of thinking through like what I was doing in my day to day. That was something else that I had kind of been keeping track of. And I think that the soft skills were really like just the most transferable of all the things that I had been doing. So if you think about the occupational therapy, for instance, you're constantly using communication skills to talk to patients, doctors, families, other rehab professionals, nursing staff, all of that stuff. And you have to be super clear in what you're saying and how you're saying it to make sure that everybody understands what you're trying to talk about. You kind of have to like speak in user-friendly, non-technical terms.
Yeah.
And that's like, if you think about it, that is something that we preach all the time as data analysts. It's like you want to be talking to stakeholders who are probably non-technical in a way that really makes sense to them and makes them want to implement your recommendations, kind of use the insights that you're providing. So like something like that was, it became very, very quickly obvious to me that it was a skill that I could really take and kind of mold and reposition and then reuse it in a totally different way. Um, and I think, I kind of did things that were very similar with critical thinking, problem solving, all those skills that, again, I was using every day as an OT. I was having to evaluate patients and students. I was having to kind of plan their treatment. I was having to reiterate, reevaluate, and all of those, like all of that takes such a strong level of problem solving and critical thinking. And it's like, okay, now that I'm thinking about transitioning into data, if I think about that data analysis workflow, it's like you are constantly having to think critically. What are the metrics I care about? What's the data that I actually need to pull to get me the information that I need when I run into problems in SQL, which I still do all of the times. Like,
We all
how do
do.
I
We all do.
yeah. Like even you who like you have an entire course about SQL. I'm sure there are still times when it's like, what's going on here? And like you have to use problem solving to get to the answer. Um, and again, it was just kind of like a shift in how I was thinking about like all of these skills that I developed over the last 8 years. They were still so valuable to me, just in a completely different way.
I really like that because it makes it a less intimidating jump. Because I
Yeah.
think from an outsider's perspective, there's such different fields, but it seems like, yeah, there's that nice connection there.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I really like found as I got more and more into it. It was like, yes, obviously the technical skills are totally different. But there is just so much overlap in the way that you have to think and the way that you have to communicate and the way that you have to collaborate with people. Like you're right. I think it made it way, way less intimidating where it's like, oh, so many of my skills are already where they need to be or like surmounted where they need to be because of my background.
So another, I guess I have the opposite question then, which is, was there anything that was just really hard?
That's a great question. I think that the maybe the biggest thing that was hard was just readjusting to a completely different job. In occupational therapy, typically you are very active. Like, you're either walking to and from patients' rooms, you're helping them with strengthening, you're playing games with students, depending on what your OT role is. And now I have to be really aware of the fact that I'm sitting in front of my computer for 8 hours a day. I recently had to get better glasses because I was finding that I was straining my eyes from looking at computers for so long. So I think like honestly, the biggest shift for me was like not even skill related. It was just like job function and job role related.
That's so true. I remember starting a tech job and then I went to the eye doctor and they told me to do these exercises where you like look away for 20 seconds. And I do that now and that really helps. So for anyone
I
listening,
I need to do that more. I've told my sister about the fact that my eyes are like strained and she's like, "Do you do the 20 seconds for every 20 minutes rule or something?" And it's the same where it's like you have to like focus on the distance for 20 seconds. I'm like, I should.
it's a
You're
lot of,
right.
yes, it's a lot more self-motivation.
Yes. And I mean, it's definitely like now that I've officially been to the eye doctor and they're telling me like maybe that'll be enough to actually make me do it.
But overall, you like your transition to this role.
Yes, I love it. I definitely was right about those things that I was looking for. I am now like in the technical space. I'm like a career that has so much room for growth. And I do really love being remote. So, overall, like generally very smooth, very, very happy transition.
And I would say just from our perspective, like I've worked with you for a few years, just seeing your growth over the years too, it's amazing because I think being a data analyst, it's really that step that gets you in the door. And then you can, I feel like you're doing tons of stuff now, like working with clients and product. And there's so many opportunities from just getting in as a data analyst.
Totally agree. I think that like one of the cool things about being a data analyst is that you get to see a lot of different like functions in the business. And so then you kind of get to be like, oh, well, I like this part of the business. And, you know, now not only do I have the business domain knowledge, the data knowledge, but I also can like use these skills and continue to progress and grow. And I think it's really cool that that's like an opportunity that doesn't feel like it's universal in all roles.
Very true. And I think just from you working with so many different types of people before in your prior role, like that helps with your role
Yes.
today too. Just because, like at Maven, we have people coming from all different backgrounds trying to learn data skills. So,
Yeah, and it's I also like I get to have the really fun experience of kind of having been on both sides of Maven where I was a learner for a long time and then I started working for the company. So I get to speak to the people on the learner side and be like, these courses worked for me. I was not a data person. Didn't know SQL, didn't really know Excel as outside of your very basic, this is the table and this is what it does. Um, and I get to be kind of a success story and talk to them about where they can go with their own skills. So it's really cool to have that too.
it sounds so fulfilling.
Yeah.
I do want to ask about that then. So, you mentioned taking Maven courses before you transitioned. Um, what are some other ways you skilled up?
Yeah, so I tried a bunch of different stuff. I did take part of the Google Data Analytics certificate program for data, the one that came out a couple of years ago, and kind of got a basic level of knowledge there. I did a bunch of SQL tutorials. I did like SQL Bolt tutorials. I did W3 schools. There were so many of those, and I got a bunch of Udemy courses kind of based on interest. Um, so
Wait,
a
so how
lot
many
of
courses do you think you took overall? Because it sounds like a lot.
um. That's a great question. I don't know. So, like the Google Analytics or Google Data Analytics certificate, I did do that the whole way through. I will say I kind of didn't put in the same amount of effort towards the end because I realized like it was a great beginner level introduction to concepts like SQL and R and things like that, but it wasn't going to be enough to get me in the door somewhere.
Mm.
Um, so then, I took all four of Maven's SQL courses. I took Excel formulas and functions from Maven. Um, and then, I finished at least two Udemy courses. So I kind of just tried to find what worked for my learning style. So all in all, it was probably like maybe like 10 to 12 different courses, which is something that I might change looking back on it. But it was helpful for me to kind of see all the different facets of here's the technical skills and here's different ways to approach learning them at least. So it wasn't a total loss.
No, I mean everything is learning experience, right? Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
so then you said you wanted to find courses that fit your learning style. What do you think your learning style is, and like what courses actually hit that spot?
Yeah. So without sounding too like Maven crazy, I think that I really did learn that the best courses for me were the ones that were project based. So for instance, like the reason I tried, you know, every SQL tutorial I could get my hands on is because I always started from the beginning from like the select all from, and it was like it for whatever reason just never stuck. And you walk through SQL tutorials and they kind of slowly ramp it up, but there's not a lot of like room for practical application. It's kind of just like, okay, here's the where clause. Okay, now go practice the where clause. And okay, here's the having clause. Go practice that. And so there's no like smooth ramp up necessarily. And what I found was like it just wasn't sticking in my brain. And so I found that doing project-based courses where it's like, okay, let's learn a concept. You go apply that concept, come back, build on that concept in our next assignment, come back and learn a little bit more, build on that. That just seemed to kind of be the way that I've found I was learning most efficiently. And most like in terms of like cost, it was the most like cost effective, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would just remember when I was first learning, for me, I'm in data science. When I was first learning text analysis, the thing that worked best for me was just like someone giving me an idea for a project, and then I just figure it all out, like figure out how to get the data, how to structure the data. Like you just kind of need to figure that out on your own.
Yeah, and I think like to your point too, like one of the best things that I did for myself was like that project portfolio piece of it where it's like let me take a data set and like let me do an entire project from beginning to end where it's like you've got to do some level of cleaning the data, determining what you're interested in finding like insights in, going through the actual analysis, putting together the visualizations, and then coming out with like, here's the recommendations that I would have based on this data set. And I feel like that was such a good moment for me to be like, oh, okay, I don't need the hand holding. I can do this. But yeah, I agree. I think like just kind of getting in and doing it and trying new things and figuring out why they did or didn't work is so helpful.
So about that project portfolio, like that is another thing that sounds pretty intimidating coming from a different field. So, like, at what point did you feel ready to put together a portfolio? What were some projects you put in there? Yeah, just
Yeah.
give us all the details.
I still don't feel ready to put together a portfolio is the answer. I don't think that you're ever going to feel ready. Like that is the conclusion that I've come to is that you're never going to feel like your projects are good enough. They're not advanced enough. They're not in the right place. And so it's like one of the biggest leaps that you kind of have to just get over and accept that like it's never going to be perfect, but having a project is better than not having a project.
Yeah.
So I think like that was a big one for me. And then the other piece of it too is like I found that the project portfolio was a great way for me to increase my own confidence. So like when I went to go interview for my first data job, which was in a health insurance company, I talked to the hiring manager about a telecom churn analysis that I had done. Actually, it was a Maven data set. And it was totally unrelated to anything I would have been doing at that company. Like talking about like telecom customers who were leaving the company and figuring out why and what you could do to change that. But what I found was like I had this project that I had done by myself from beginning to end. I could talk really knowledgeably about how I cleaned the data, why I approached the analysis this way, what insights I found, what recommendations I would have based on those insights. And so even though the like subject matter was not at all related, it was so helpful for me to have the confidence to be able to talk. And at the end of the day, like I didn't even end up showing that project to the hiring manager at all.
Wow,
But
that's so surprising.
yeah, like the fact that I was able, like we had a phone call and he was asking me about projects that I had done and I was able to talk him through it. So even though he didn't see it himself, it was like, this is why I made these decisions. This is how I approached this problem that I ran into. And like the thinking behind the project was more important to him than the output itself. So like it feels like it's a good thing to keep in mind that like showcasing how you think and why you approach things in certain ways is so much more important than the end product a lot of the time.
That's awesome. And do you feel like the fact that it was a personal project versus a work project, did that make a difference at all?
I think looking back on it, I was more comfortable talking about it because it was a personal project. Like in the back of my mind, if I had been talking about a work project, there's a really good chance that I would have been like, oh, can I say this? Am I breaking any kind of like,
Mm.
is there any kind of like privacy issues or, data issues that I shouldn't be sharing? And obviously, like I would have thought through that prior to the interview had I been in that position. But I just felt more confident being like, you know what, this is essentially like not a fake data set but it fabricated. And so there was no issues with any of that. So I kind of felt like it was a good opportunity for me to be able to just like talk openly and talk through it all. Hey everyone. If this interview speaks to you, I highly recommend checking out Maven Analytics Thinking Like an Analyst course. It's one of my favorite Maven courses and helped me break into data analytics. This course, taken by thousands of people, teaches you how to think like an analyst, from understanding the business case to developing and sharing data driven insights. Check it out, exclusive on Maven Analytics.
And do you feel like if the employer, like let's say you're applying to a healthcare role, do you feel like the project that you're explaining has to be healthcare related or
I really don't think so. Like this example is a really good example of like, again, it was so much more about that thought process and like what recommendations and how I was approaching things rather than the end product. Um, had I had a healthcare data set, I probably would have gone ahead and presented that to him instead. But at the time I didn't. And I think it kind of speaks to the fact that like maybe that would be valuable to include if you're looking at healthcare data analyst roles, but it's certainly not necessary.
I think that's a really important point though, because I feel like these days everyone tries to make like customized projects or like try to make themselves fit every role. And the
Mhm.
fact that you were able to do that without that extra effort, but just rather like being really confident in your project, like that was enough.
Yeah, and I think like it helped that I had the domain knowledge. Like as somebody who's coming from healthcare, I was able to leverage a lot of that and talk very knowledgeably about, ICD-10 codes and things that like somebody in healthcare would potentially need to know. But like if I think about projects, it's kind of like I want one that can show off my SQL skills. I want one that can show off maybe my like data cleaning and manipulation skills, and I want one that's going to really show off my visualization skills. And between the three of those maybe aspects, like you can use them no matter if they're related to the subject or the industry that you're applying for or not.
I feel like the common thread through our whole discussion today is just you just need these critical thinking skills and it's just like general knowledge that works across industries, across like different like roles. It's just yeah, those are the core skills you need.
It's so funny because I like look back sometimes and I'm like, would I have had the same experience if I had gone down like the UX design route? Like, would I still be saying, communication, collaboration, critical thinking were all super necessary? And I think the answer is yes. And so it's like, if you've got those types of skills that are harder to develop, like through courses, it's kind of like a hands-on, like you have to just get these through experience. If you can supplement those with whatever the technical skills like that you need are in the industry you're applying for, it's like you're already more than halfway there, right? Like as long as you can kind of share, this is how I can use these skills, and I also do have the technical skills needed in this job. Like it's so it's just so powerful because it makes things less intimidating when you think about like, oh my gosh, I'm changing careers entirely. And you are, like, there's no doubt about it. But like, there's just so much overlap when it comes to these skills that you didn't even realize you were picking up along the way.
That's really encouraging. I'm sure I'm sure a lot of people can empathize with that. Um,
Yeah.
so we just talked about portfolios. I also wanted to talk about your resume. So when you applied to your first job outside of your field, what did or didn't you include on your resume?
Yeah. So I included basically everything from my healthcare resume. I
Even though it
included
was irrelevant. I mean, it's not irrelevant. It's like what we're talking about here. It may seem that way.
and that's I think exactly what the thing was. It was like if I hadn't included at least most of my background as an OT, my resume would have been basically blank. That's what I had done since like grad school when I graduated. But so what I kind of did instead is I again targeted originally a job that was in healthcare because I knew that it would help with like I have the domain knowledge even if I don't have the data analyst background. But I also did revise my resume. So like instead of talking about things that I might focus on in an OT job that I'm applying for, things like, working with caregivers, like putting together IEPs, things that like are definitely not applicable to a data role. I talked about things like how many patients met or exceeded the goals that we had set up for them. Like what was the size of my caseload? What was my productivity rate? How did I infuse data into my everyday role? So I took the like the information and again I just kind of like pivoted it to focus on things that were going to be really important to somebody who is hiring for a data role.
That sounds like a smart move. Like it's the
It,
same information but presented in a different way, which is kind of what you do as a data analyst.
it's total yes, and it like and do not get me wrong, it was challenging. Like
Yeah, that's the hardest thing to think from someone else's perspective.
and I will say like one of the things that I did for myself that was really helpful is I did hire somebody who helped me kind of go through my resume and see it through a different lens where it's like, okay, yes, you did all of these things in your OT role, but like think about how to shift them subtly so that all of a sudden you're talking about a completely different like part of your role that is way more relevant to what you're applying for now. And having somebody do that for me and like walk me through, okay, this is how I would think about this, or like this is how another client of mine in the past was able to kind of pivot their experience was very valuable for me. So I don't want to like undermine the fact that it was hard and it was helpful to have somebody there to like advise me along the way.
No, that's really great to know because it sounds like this transition, I mean, it's such a big career transition, and you just need a lot of help along the way. And it sounds like you got that from courses, from practicing on your own, from someone's help with your resume. Was there any other like resources or just other people that mentored you along the way?
Yeah, I think one of like there are so many ways I could answer that. I think one of the other things that I found was there was, and I can't remember where I met her, but there was somebody who told me about how just like not groundbreaking, I don't know what the word is, how like important a cover letter can be. And like a lot of the time it's like you think, okay, like I'm just gonna copy and paste the same cover letter over and over and over. Nobody's gonna read it. No one cares what it says. And I think that that's very untrue in a career changer's like job of their search as they're working through that. Your cover letters and again, this person was so helpful to me in talking about how like your cover letter is a place where you have free reign to explain, no, my background does not align with what you're looking for. Let me tell you why I'm actually a better fit than a typical data analyst would be. And you have so much like room to maneuver and make yourself stand out there. And that was like, I will to the day I stop this career, hopefully, 40 years in the future or whatever, I will stand on the fact that like my cover letter was one of the big things that helped me get my first job. So it
That
was
is
super
that is a
helpful.
hot take. I feel like that's a controversial
It
like
it
subject. Yeah.
definitely is. And like I saw, I don't know where this was. I'm sure it was on LinkedIn, but I saw a survey of I think it was HR people, and the question was like, how do you read cover letters that are submitted, yes or no? And it was like pretty close to a 50-50 split, with the no's being a little bit more like ahead at the time. And I think the big thing about my cover letter was like I I did a lot of extra research. I went to the company's values and missions page. I took their values and missions. I essentially like templatized it and put in my own information that aligned exactly with each of their values. And it looked really way different than any kind of cover letter, and it sounded different than any cover letter. And I think that that was probably enough to make the recruiter stop and go, "Oh, wait, let me read this." And so maybe the answer is like, I would read a cover letter if it were different enough to stand out, right? So like
Yeah.
it's yeah. And I cannot say for sure. I never asked the recruiter, like, did you read my cover letter? Is that the reason you contacted me? But like, if I think about it, um, like it was one of the things that I did differently than most people, I think, and that probably made me stand out.
That's fascinating to me. Like this is a surprising fact to me. But then when I think about it, like I think about your story, it makes a lot of sense because for me, I take on a few mentees every year, and a lot of people will message me and ask, but then if it's like general, like high level, I will typically decline. But then the ones that just are so personalized and it's like why we're a great match, I say yes to. That's totally the case.
Well, I think it's funny too, if I think about it like in a grander, like a broader scheme like that, it's like I get a lot of LinkedIn messages that are asking for advice and stuff, and I have since I started talking about my transition on LinkedIn. And more often than not, the ones that I respond to are the ones where there's either really pointed questions or there's a very personalized, hey, I saw that you wrote this thing. It really resonated with me. Here's why. It's not like the typically, and there's nothing wrong with doing it this way, but like the messages where it's like, hey, would love to talk to you about your transition. Like that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm more likely to respond to the people who have put in time and effort and said, hey, here are my very specific questions, or this is why, like, I would love to talk to you. This is why you're the person that like would be the best fit for my questions. Um, so it's a very similar, like when you put in
Yeah.
the thought and effort, you're more likely to get a response.
And That is a great transition into our last section of this conversation. Because for those of you watching, the whole reason we're doing this interview or this interview series is because Lauren gets tons of messages on LinkedIn asking about career transitions. So we have a few of those messages here for Lauren to answer. One person asked on LinkedIn, I'd love to hear any advice you might have on how I can better prepare myself for data analyst roles, especially in healthcare. I know the job market is challenging right now, but I'm hoping to leverage my clinical background in this new direction.
Yeah, and it's such a good question, and it's one that like I've received multiple iterations of. But this is like so relevant to this conversation right now,
Yeah.
especially. So I think one of the things that I would do is kind of keep in mind that the current experience that you either have or had as that clinician, that clinical background, automatically gives you an edge. It gives you domain knowledge, especially if you're looking at data analyst jobs in healthcare. It gives you domain knowledge. You are a subject matter expert in that area. And so, really keeping that in mind and kind of coming at it from that same lens that we've sort of been talking about, where it's like, I have all of the skills that I need. The only thing that I need to develop are those technical skills that are not easy by any means, but that is doable.
I think that's
Um,
actually the easier part because there's
yeah,
just code to do.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like that is that they are hard, like not hard in that they're difficult to learn necessarily, but like they are the hard skills that it's like you either know them or you don't. You either take the course and you learn them or you don't. And that's so much like in a way easier than developing these like kind of nebulous communication, collaboration skills. So like I think that that is the biggest thing is like be aware that you've already done so much of the work. Use the background that you have developed as that edge. And then the other thing too is like when you're talking to, hiring managers, recruiters in your cover letter, in your resume, emphasize the clinical background. Are you Epic certified? Do you have this really deep knowledge of ICD-10 codes? Like, use that in applications and conversations with people so that you're, again, you're developing the technical skills in Excel, SQL, Power BI, Tableau, but then use the fact that you already have some technical skills in, electronic health records and things like that and use it to your benefit. Um, so I think like that's the big thing, right? Like, know that your background is relevant and helpful to you, develop the technical skills that you're going to need, and then really emphasize your clinical knowledge and your background in any kind of conversations that you can have with people.
That sounds really empowering because I feel like that's usually what people are scared to do is emphasize those because going to a new field, but you're saying that's your superpower is that you have this specialized knowledge.
Yeah, like you've got just so much, even like when I was, so my first data job was as a service operations healthcare data analyst at a health insurance company. And like even having a basic understanding of like what kidney disease is and the different like types of kidney disease was helpful. And like that's not something that if somebody goes through school to get their degree in data analysis or in, business intelligence, they don't know what kidney disease is or the different ICD-10 codes that are associated with kidney disease, right? So like use it and like be proud of the fact that you have so much like working knowledge of things that are going to be really helpful in that role.
I am that person because
Yeah.
I studied engineering and analytics and I worked at a health insurance company for 2 years and I was on an ICD project. And the whole time I'm like, I don't know what any of these codes are. And it took a while because like on the job I learned about all the codes, but then I feel like I didn't have as practical, like I didn't have like in-person knowledge. And then only over the years, like now I know people who work in healthcare and we'll have conversations on the side. Now I have a mo more well-rounded view of it. But it really took like on the job plus like external knowledge to get to that point. And so I had to work with I ended up working with medical coders who did have that expertise and then combined with my technical skills to get that. But if you already have that, you're kind of like a two in one, right? You have all of it.
Yes, totally. And I think that it's also like one of those things where if you've got that knowledge, you are more likely to be able to derive insights from data that somebody else might miss, where it's like, oh, these two diagnoses are related. And so when I'm seeing a correlation, it's like, okay, let me go explore that deeper. And if somebody's just looking at the ICD-10 code by itself, they're like, okay, and like,
Yep.
so there's just like an extra step there that you get to take out because you've got the background. Um, and it's really, I think, just about like, again, positioning that in a way that makes people be like, oh yeah, okay, like, yes, you can develop the technical skills, but this domain knowledge and the subject matter expertise is something that like is going to take you potentially years to get
Yeah.
to that, like you're already there. You can just skip over those years and already be there, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I almost think just for data analysis in general, it's most people learn the technical and then the domain expertise, but I do think like the opposite is the better approach because it's almost like business school. Like people who go to business school, you need some work experience first before you go into business school, and that's what makes it really stick. It's like for data, if you have that experience and then you learn the data skills, then it really sticks. So,
yeah, and I think it's just it's so helpful when you're thinking about like how do I actually make an impact as an analyst? It's like if you have the business knowledge and like the domain knowledge to at the forefront, it's in my opinion, I feel like it's easier to then apply the analysis and like see those trends in the light of like having the business background, right? So like I think it's very similar.
yeah. Okay, I have another question here.
Yeah.
Someone else is asking, what advice do you have for someone navigating the job market with no formal experience?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things is that like being able to market yourself is second to none. And it's really hard. And I know that it's really hard from experience, but like being able to again leverage your skills, your transferable skills that you have, like highlight any type of experience where data played a role and like really go over the background that you have with a fine-tooth comb where it's talking about like, did you track patient outcomes? Did you track length of stay for a patient? Like, did you kind of play around with things and see, okay, if I do this thing, that patient is able to leave, my facility on average a day earlier. Like think about the things that you did and revisit them with this lens of how can I apply data to this and see kind of what comes out of it. Um, I think that that's like one of the biggest things. And then the other thing for me is probably actually the hardest part of what I had to do was really building a network. And for me, I primarily chose LinkedIn as my way to do that. So like if you're using that as your primary way of building a network, like get active. Don't just like be a ghost in the background. Either post things yourself, comment on people's posts, get engaged in conversations, like get your name out there and build a brand for yourself as a person who is a data analyst with really specialized background and knowledge in something that most data analysts are not going to have. I think that like that cannot be understated by with how important it is for people to do it and do it well.
That's great. So to summarize, you mentioned networking and then also marketing yourself. So all these soft skills that yeah, help get you to where you are today.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think if I had not done what I did with LinkedIn, which very early on in my learning, I started posting articles about what I was learning and how it applied to healthcare and how it was different from healthcare and how it was similar. Like that one step that I took, like it helped me network because people reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is really interesting." Like actually even John Pauler from Maven reached out to me and said, "Hey, can we repost one of your articles? This was really interesting." Um, so like I built a network through that and I marketed myself through that. And it was like that one thing was so powerful for me. Um
Wait, is
to
that how you got the job at Maven?
no, so that's how I got introduced to John. And then I took some of our courses and then at one point John had posted something on LinkedIn asking for SQL TAs and I commented and said, I have no actual experience, but I would love to. Um And that's actually how I got my foot in the door was
Oh,
through that LinkedIn comment. But I wouldn't have connected with him if he hadn't seen my article and reached out and said, "Hey, can we repost this?" So like,
that's fascinating. And I feel, and it's just you've come so far in the last few years because like now you're writing these crazy SQL queries and it all came from a T. Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, yeah. And it's like I look back at it and think it was very worth all of it, even if it was challenging for sure. But like doing it and like getting myself out there and getting exposure has only led me to where I am now. So
Oh, well, that brings us to our final question that we want to ask everyone on this interview series, which is if you were to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
yeah, and I kind of already touched on this earlier. Maybe it was like a little bit of foreshadowing. I would have figured out my learning style a lot earlier, and I would have not bought 17 Udemy courses. Um, they not to say that they were not useful, but I was actually before this conversation, I went into my Udemy account and I looked. I bought 17. I started four.
Oh
I
no.
finished two.
Oh no.
So I probably should have like realized earlier on that Udemy courses were not the right fit for me. And that's fine if they're good for other people, but like learning my style, putting together an actual like plan to learn and not just being like, oh, this course sounds like fun. I'm going to buy this one and then expect that they'll actually come back and take it. That was so I think my biggest thing is like figuring out an actual plan for learning and then executing that plan to the best of my ability.
That's very good advice. You gotta have self-discipline.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's just so hard when like you
it
see all these
is.
really cool, interesting courses and you want to learn everything. So,
It really is. I feel like that's kind of the general life advice is don't get distracted by everything out there. Like, you really have to be intentional about what you want to do. And
yeah.
it's hard, but you've done it and now you can advise other people on doing it too.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it is possible. It's just like learn from my mistakes.
That's amazing. Thanks for being that person to make mistakes for other people to learn from.
More than happy to do it. And if I ever go back and take any of these Udemy courses that I bought 3 years ago at this point, like I'll let you know. I'll update you on how helpful they were. So
Yes, yes, please. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for the conversation today. For those of you watching, I hope this was useful advice for you if you're trying to break into the data field. Thanks for joining us. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more data content just like this. See you all in the next one.
bye guys.